Operations. It's one of the most overlooked areas of business, yet also one of the most critical. It's the engine that keeps things running. It represents your company's foundation, and it's also the proverbial back office that makes growth and scale possible. But sadly, it's usually marketing, sales, and branding that get the lion's share of an entrepreneur's attention. Hi, I'm 𝗕𝗂𝘂𝘀𝗶𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗃, and if you've been listening to this show for a while, then you know part of my mission with this podcast is to not only put operations on the map, but to also close the operations gap by providing access to resources. The lack of access is only part of the reason why more companies don't spend time improving their operations. Another reason is the associated time and cost, and worst of all, the fact that operations just isn't considered sexy. Well, you're about to hear from someone who's just as passionate about operations as I am. She's going to shatter a lot of these persistent myths about operations. Think about this. What good is it to spend so much time on marketing that you can't fulfill orders when demand for your goods and services increases? It's time we start operating our businesses on the inside just as impressively as the image we market on the outside. This is Season 12, Episode 153. Let's start the show.
Welcome to Business Infrastructure, the podcast about curing back office blues of fast-growing businesses. If you're a business owner or operator looking for practical tips and solutions to scaling your business in a sustainable manner, you're in the right place. Now here's your hostess, 𝗕𝗂𝘂𝘀𝗶𝘂𝘀𝗀𝗏𝗂𝗃.
We are well into Season 12, where we're tackling two important areas that every business has to contend with at some point, especially as a result of the pandemic: diversity and digital transformation. And joining us today to contribute to this conversation in Boston, Massachusetts, is Alison Elworthy. She's the Executive Vice President of Revenue Operations at Hubspot. Now, you might be wondering, what on earth is revenue operations? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about as it relates to diversity and digital transformation and how that can advance this emerging area in business. Alison, this is long overdue, much anticipated. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Alicia. It's so great to finally get to chat with you, and excited to spend the next hour together.
I am too, and I know it's going to go by really fast, so I'm warning you now. There's probably going to be so much more that we both will want to say, but unfortunately, we just might not be able to get it in. But let's see what we can cover. I'd actually like to start with this quote that I read on your LinkedIn bio. Alison believes that operations teams hold the key to breaking linear growth and achieving sustainable scale. So I'd like to start with, where did your passion for operations begin, Alison?
Great question. I think it began back in grade school. I mean, I've always been really interested in math and science, right? And I remember I went to college and at that time, if you liked math and science, you were going to go to college and become a doctor. And then I quickly realized that biology was not for me. So I quickly started to focus on business and just fell in love with business and went to business school. And then after business school, I joined Hubspot and quickly found my way into operations, kind of in an informal way. I started on the marketing team. And at the time we were generating, thousands of leads, but there was no way of really qualifying those leads. And so I spent a lot of time trying to put a value against every lead that we generated for the business. And essentially that turned into a new role, which was marketing operations. So that's kind of where my passion for operations started. And since then, I've held a bunch of different ops roles at HubSpot, in marketing ops, sales ops, and then more general ops. So that's really, the history behind it, I think.
And just as a really quick, very interesting side note here, I noticed that you have an undergraduate degree in human factors engineering from Tufts University. What is that exactly?
Great question. And this kind of goes, part with my story is, really being obsessed with math and science. And I didn't really know what engineering was in high school. It wasn't really anything that anyone talked to me about. And once I was at Tufts and realized that I was not great in the life sciences and in biology. It was, so what's next? And I kind of stumbled upon engineering. And what was great about this major, I was in a liberal arts school, and it was a major that combined psychology, liberal arts school, as well as engineering. And so the whole basis of it is, the human part. How do you design systems and technology and processes in a human way? So that's the human factors part. And so it's kind of bringing together psychology and mechanical engineering into one major, and I loved it. So that was kind of how I was introduced to engineering at Tufts.
Okay, and I definitely see the connection now to how, once you started working at HubSpot, how that eventually led to a role in marketing operations and ultimately the role that you're in now, which is the Executive Vice President of Revenue Operations. Can you explain, first of all, if we could back up a bit, please explain who HubSpot is and what a CRM is. Because Alison, I have to be honest with you, I still have conversations with people and they're just like, what is that? What is a CRM? And well, I don't have customers, so that doesn't relate to me. Like, are you kidding me? If you're in business, you do have customers. You may not refer to them as customers, but you have people that are a part of your network. You do have contacts that you should manage. So can we start there before we get into what revenue operations is versus marketing operations? Who is HubSpot and what is a CRM and why is it so needed?
Sure. Well, every business should have customers. You're not in a business without customers. So
exactly.
I totally agree with your point. I'll start with your second question because that'll help me explain what HubSpot is and does. So CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management. And HubSpot is a leading CRM platform. So we provide software and support to help our customers grow better. And so our platform includes things like marketing, sales, service, operation, and website management products to really help businesses grow and scale. So a CRM is essentially the foundation of any business. It tracks and manages, all of the interactions that you're having with your prospects and customers in one centralized place.
Well said. Well said. Now, getting to, more definitions here, you mentioned how you worked your way up to a role in marketing operations at HubSpot. What is that exactly?
Sure. So I'll add a little bit of the history here. When I graduated from business school, I thought, okay, I interned at HubSpot. We were a scrappy startup. This was 12, 11 years ago. And the business was growing so quickly. And our CEO said, well, why don't you just meet with the executive team and figure out, what team you want to work on? And I said, oh, okay. So I met with everyone, met with our CMO. I'm like, oh, marketing sounds interesting. And little did I know that marketing requires a lot of, content creation. And I am a terrible writer. It takes me just so much time and energy to create content. And I remember, back in the day, we would stack rank. Everyone in the marketing team was required to write a blog post. And HubSpot has an amazing blog. Mm-hmm. And then we would stack rank everyone on the marketing team to see who had the most views. And I would always come in dead last. And I started thinking, I don't think I belong in marketing. This is not my strength. I don't, get energy from it. And so I naturally started to shift towards kind of the operations of marketing, like I mentioned before, and, trying to understand how marketing played a role in helping HubSpot generate revenue. And marketing does that by creating opportunities, by creating leads, essentially to pass on to our sales team to close, to then become customers. And so I started to gravitate towards kind of this intersect between marketing and sales, where marketing is working to generate leads and a certain number of leads and, essentially put a dollar value to every single lead the marketing team was created that would then be handed over to the sales organization. So that's a little bit of, how I found my way into marketing operations and started kind of modeling, if sales needed to hit their revenue goals, what does that mean for marketing? What type of leads and how many leads would the marketing team need to generate month over month in order for sales to hit their sales goals?
And so now you've advanced to this role in revenue operations. And it sounds like from the research that I've done and things that I've read online, this is something that you're the kind of the creator behind this new area at HubSpot. Is that correct? Revenue operations?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point for sure.
Okay, so what exactly is that? Because I know it's called RevOps for short. So for those who are listening and they're not familiar with this term, what is revenue operations and how is that different from marketing operations?
Sure. So one way to think about it is that most organizations invest in operations teams. So, there is at HubSpot, we had a marketing operations team. We have a pretty big sales operations team, a customer success operations team. And these teams work on the ops for their function, right? The ops and the strategy. They create strategies, enablement, systems, data, analyze that data to really help drive the execution and strategy for their function and organization. And so historically at HubSpot, we were very much aligned by those functions: sales, marketing, and CS. And we had operations teams and enablement teams and strategy teams supporting those functions. And I think the issue that we saw as we started to scale and grow is that the way in which we were creating our strategies and executing was very much a result of the way in which we were organized. So if you took a step back and actually looked at kind of the entire, what we call the go-to-market experience, the handoff between marketing, sales, and then to customer success, that customer experience was started to get pretty disjointed. And so we called that a function out strategy, right? It was all of the functions focused on what they were looking to do, but no one was kind of looking at the interconnectivity between them and looking at the holistic customer experience that we were creating with those siloed ops teams. And so RevOps, part of RevOps is really about bringing all of those ops teams across your go-to-market functions, marketing, sales, and CS, into one team to start thinking holistically about your strategy, your enablement, your processes, your systems, how you plan to create ultimately a better end customer experience.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. And I know we'll be taking an even deeper dive into exactly how to implement revenue operations. But before we go there, speaking of HubSpot, this podcast is now a part of HubSpot's new podcast network. It's so exciting. And Alison, one thing that has struck me already, first of all, everyone that I've worked with and that I've spoken with so far has been absolutely amazing. And I have been pleasantly surprised by the number of women that I've had the pleasure of working with over at HubSpot. And I know that the company has an initiative to create a more diverse workforce. I've even read the 2021, I believe, diversity report. Can you speak a little bit more about that internal initiative that the company has to create a more diverse workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is one of our top priorities as an organization. We focus on it and talk about it just like we do, our revenue goals, right? It's that important, ensuring that we not only, create a diverse environment and team is really important, but ensuring that we continue to, retain and support our employees so that they can do their best work. Because that's ultimately what it comes down to for us to be, to enable our customers to be successful. And we need to be successful as a business. And we need our people to be just as successful. And the people on our teams are critical. And so our diversity and inclusion initiative is one of our top priorities as a business. And we've spent a lot of time and energy on this over the years. I think we've made a lot of progress from a gender perspective. I've been at HubSpot for almost 11 years. And what's great, I look at our executive team, we have so many women on it. And, when I first started at HubSpot, I don't think that there was one. Same thing with our board. We have a ton of representation on our board. We have of women, and that was not always the case. And I think there's still work to be done, especially from race perspective. But it's not going to happen overnight. But I do think we are making progress, and I'm so glad you checked out our diversity report that we published. We publish it every year. I think this was the 5th year. So you can actually kind of see the progress that we've made, and also, the room that we have to grow in this space.
I think it's really profound that you all have that level of transparency, because, we oftentimes hear companies, we're given lip service, I think, a lot of times, but you all have not only made it a top priority, but you're actually tracking it in true operations form and sharing that information so that people can make that comparison year after year. So that's really cool.
I will, we say, sunlight is the best disinfectant, and, you need to be transparent with this, and you need to track it to drive accountability. And so I think it's pretty bold of HubSpot, not just to share this internally, but externally as well. So I completely agree with you. I'm very proud to work at a company like HubSpot.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we put a link to that diversity report in the show notes for this episode. So I'm wondering if you'll experiment with me here for a bit, Alison. So far, in this conversation around diversity with some of the previous guests, we've tackled it from an age perspective: race, gender, disability, socioeconomic status. But I'm wondering if we can actually talk about diversity also in the type of work that we're doing, or what our actual skill sets are. And being that you are functioning within a company that is at its core about sales and marketing, right? In terms of breaking down those silos, instituting a RevOps team at HubSpot, have you found that there's been resistance, or there's a very high degree of education that's had to take place? And how are you recruiting people into this new team?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a pretty big change for HubSpot, I will say. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about how to enroll the team, around this new mission. And, really, it's all about the why, and understanding the why. Why are we creating RevOps? I think it's just so critical. And I think there's a threefold win. I think there's a win for, our customers, as I talked about earlier. The way in which you're organized internally, I think, truly reflects the external experience that you create as a business. I think, internally for HubSpot, that this is really going to help us scale. We'll chat about what nonlinear growth is all about, but I think it's really important for HubSpot to break this concept of linear growth at this point, in our growth. And then I think there's a big win for, the individuals in ops. Historically, I think a lot of times ops is a reactive function. You invest in ops when something's broken, when you need to fix something, when you need to clean something up. And what that often means is the folks that are in ops, especially if they're kind of decentralized, are the last to be invested in from a career perspective.
Yes.
And so what's great about pulling RevOps together, all of the ops teams together, is we're a force now, right? And so there's a big opportunity to really invest and define the ops career, and how we, recruit and retain and develop, ops talent, at HubSpot. And I think we also have the opportunity to do this more broadly and do it for the industry, because I truly believe this is where we're headed.
Yes, you're absolutely being a trendsetter in that regard, and show us some love. Us operations folks, we often have to take a back seat to the other quote unquote sexier departments within a company, which tends to be the customer facing ones like sales and marketing and even accounting. Some companies become so revenue and profit focused at the expense of some of the other core business units or functions within the business. So I just thought it would be interesting for us to have a conversation around how, within an organization, the folks who are taking looking at the details and processes and workflows and systems, we aren't always shown love and attention the way that some of our peers may be shown. So thank you for humoring me and trying to use that angle, I guess, from a diversity perspective. Now, we also mentioned that another topic or an area that so many companies, if not every single business on the planet right now, has recently had to contend with, again, as a result of the pandemic, is the adoption of digital technologies and transforming the way that our companies operate. For example, restaurants, hotels, we've all had to adopt, if not a completely remote, contactless forms of delivering our products and services, or maybe even adopting a hybrid approach. And I read an excellent article that you wrote, Alison, about the stages of growth and how, as our companies grow, it's only natural that you start to invest in more people, you invest in more tools and technologies. But what happens is that you can build these teams that start to function in silos, these silos that you've been talking about so far. And within each of those silos and each of those teams, they have their own systems with their own sets of data. Nobody's talking to each other. And there's all kinds of redundancy, duplication of effort. And I'm wondering if we could talk now a little bit more about how this happens. And I just want to plug that article that you wrote. I saw it on HubSpot's blog, but I believe it's also been published on medium.com. And it's called Arise RevOps, the New Orchestrators of Customer Experience.
So, yeah, I am so passionate about this because we're kind of going through this today, and HubSpot's been a great case study for this. So when I started at HubSpot, we were this scrappy startup, right? When I was in ops, there were probably 5 of us in a small kind of one-person office, kind of crammed together. But what was great about that is that we could execute so quickly. We were agile. The person in sales sat next to me, the person in CS sat, on the other side, and we could quickly bounce ideas off each other, innovate, tweak our systems and just build, right? And that's one of the benefits from when you're kind of a small startup. But however, as you grow and scale, you continue to add people, you add systems, you add data, you add processes, which is all needed, right? It's all needed. It's a function of growing. But at some point, all of that, growth can create complexity in terms of how you operate as a business. So much so that complexity, especially between your different teams, starts to slow you down. And so there's this phenomenon about being, as you're continuing to grow, about starting as kind of, small and fast. And then as you start to grow, you start to become big and slow. And so what we're trying to balance here is this idea of being big and fast. And I think this notion of RevOps can actually help bring back speed and agility in your organization. And RevOps does that by pulling all these teams together, like figuring out where there's redundancy so you can free up resources, and also figuring out where there's kind of disjointed processes or systems or data, right? Mm-hmm. It's really important to think about centralizing those parts of your business to enable your teams to move faster.
Yes. And part of that, and I can speak from personal experience here, especially as of last year, what happened in 2020, again, it's something that we've all had to contend with. For us, it was the realization that, okay, we had all of these systems and these tools, but they didn't communicate with each other. And it was so frustrating. And here's a shameless plug for HubSpot. So many of the systems that we were using did integrate with HubSpot. So we always had a HubSpot account, but I don't know why we didn't really use. Oh, I do know why, because we were trying to figure out how to integrate forms. And that's something we're still playing around with. But that's just an aside. But so it made us realize what tools we needed to invest in for the sake of being able to have these different systems actually communicate with each other. Because even though it was automating individual processes, it still didn't flow efficiently because we were entering data sometimes 2 and 3 times into different systems, the same data. So, and it sounds like you all have created a new product that addresses that type of problem. Is that correct?
Yes, I am so excited about Operations Hub. And, as an ops person through and through, this is like, it was so exciting when we launched this because, this is what the world needs. This is what operations needs, right? And you're right. I think, as we've gone through this pandemic and, more businesses have had to transition, their business online. Your systems become even more critical. Systems and automation become more critical. And the reason why automation is so important is that, there's so much that you realize that you can actually automate in your customer experience. However, you need it to be personalized or else people are going to tune you out. And so that's why having clean and accurate data in your systems is so important, because that's what allows you to create an automated yet personalized customer experience. So, I think it's more critical than ever in this kind of, day and age and this new normal to ensure that you are, both have clean customer data, you can automate that customer data. And then finally, to your point, Alecia, about the connecting it. So that's, in a nutshell, what Operations Hub will do for our customers. And, it's still very much in the, early phases, but this is the start of something big. And I truly believe more so than ever that this is what every business needs to adopt.
Yes.
To create a truly delightful customer experience in this, day and age.
And I'm so glad you said that because it's industry agnostic, right? So operations, just similar to what you said earlier, that if you're in business, you absolutely have customers. If you're in business, you absolutely have an operations component to your business, whether you realize that or not. Because I've had people over the years, Alison, try to argue against processes. Well, we don't have a process. Yes, you do. You may not think of it that way. You may not call it that, but there is a method to your madness. Similar to, operations describes how you're doing the work. What are the steps and activities that you're doing to actually deliver your final product or service? Certain people may not actually refer to it as operations, but that's absolutely what it is. Now might be a great time to explain what business infrastructure is before we actually talk about Operations Hub. So if you are listening to this show for the first time, business infrastructure is actually an operations system for linking your people, processes, and tools to ensure that growth happens in a profitable and sustainable way. Now, back to Operations Hub. How does it work and how can it unify these elements of business infrastructure, the people, the processes and workflows, as well as the different tools and technologies? So can we start with the people component first, Alison?
Sure.
Or would it be easier to actually first describe how the tool itself actually works?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's focus on how Operations Hub works, and then we can kind of translate it.
Sure.
That works.
Okay. Yeah, let's go for it.
Great. All right. So there's 3 key features with Operations Hub that I wanted to cover and share with you, Alecia. So the first is around data sync. It's really important that you have up-to-date data. And so Operations Hubs will sync data between your SaaS applications bidirectionally to ensure that the customer data is always consistent and up to date. So we talked about the importance of creating a personalized customer experience. This data, having consistent and up-to-date data, is key to be able to do that. So that's the first piece. The next piece is programmable automation. And so when you use HubSpot workflows, operation teams can actually build custom automation using things like JavaScript to run those actions through AWS Lambda technology. And so what ultimately this does is it creates efficiencies for your internal teams and a friction-free experience for your customer. So that's the second piece, the automation. And then the third piece is data quality automation. Data quality, as I've really dove into RevOps, is so critical and important and oftentimes overlooked, right? But if you're an ops person, you know how important this is. So what you want to do is create workflows that can automatically update, key data points in your database to allow and equip your customer-facing teams with information that is truly accurate and accessible and up to date. going back to that data piece and how important the data is. So this is, those are kind of the three key aspects of Operations Hub, and more specifically, how companies can leverage it in terms of creating that great customer experience.
Got it. So as I was listening to you, Alison, a thought came to me that maybe if we could use an example of a typical process, sales-based process for service-based businesses, and that is, your lead to customer or lead to client conversion process. So you mentioned earlier how when you were starting at HubSpot, you were really focusing on what value each lead brought into the company, or what value was associated with each of those leads. So let's say we have a consulting company, and that, the people who are a part of that company, let's say they might be in sales or business development, and they are constantly networking. And as they're networking, they are meeting new people. They're gathering contact information. We're doing everything remotely right now still. but pre-pandemic, people were out there. They were exchanging business cards. And so that information then makes its way into HubSpot first, and I'm assuming it does just automatically link up with Operations Hub. But starting with that initial set of data, which is name, phone number, email address, website, physical address.
Yeah. So essentially, that is the information that goes into your CRM that we talked about earlier on this. And that's important information. And that's kind of the starting point. And what you want to do is, I'm sure, let's say you met someone at a networking event. That person or potential client may start to check you out. They may go to your website. They may download a free, trial or white paper, or, read some information on your website. And what you want to start doing is tracking every interaction with that prospect, right? So you get a 360 view of the prospect. And, let's say that prospect eventually decides to sign up and buy whatever service that you provide, right? The next phase of that is then tracking every interaction that you have with your client. And having that 360 view, because what ends up happening, there's not just one person in your company that is, working with your client. Like you mentioned before, in this case, you may have someone in sales or marketing or a relationship manager, whatever it may be. You want to be able to understand the full picture and understand all the information that surrounds that customer in terms of everything that they've done and their interests, et cetera, that you are able to track through all of your different SaaS applications.
Yes. So would that include accounting software? Because obviously as you invoice these, once you actually convert these different leads into, and I'm assuming with Operations Hub, you're able to build out that workflow, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, it could be there's so many, different applications that businesses use. And so that's the piece is, creating those integrations, being able to track that data, have that bi-directional sync, which I mentioned earlier, so that you always have up-to-date customer information, and that you also have clean, customer information and data, because that's just so critical. And I think, in this digital world, so much of your outreach is automated and, obviously not done in person. And so it's really important that, all of those workflows and the automation that you're creating is based off the data that you have, which is why having up-to-date, consistent, accurate data is so important. That's coming through, whatever applications that you may use.
Yes. So is it that, okay, let's say, because so many small businesses, for example, we use QuickBooks. And what can happen oftentimes is you might be using, let's say, HubSpot as your CRM, and you are, again, tracking that workflow and converting a lead eventually into a paying customer. And once you are ready to actually invoice that customer, what oftentimes happens is that there's some communication outside of the CRM that's taking place with accounting, whoever your bookkeeper is or your office manager. So does Operations Hub allow you through some coding that can take place in the background to bring all of that together in one place?
Yes.
Ooh, Yay!
I know, this is when we do like the hooray finally. And before Operations Hub, it was manual, right? Like manual entry for your ops teams. And I was in this place. I remember back in the day, I was working on spreadsheets and inputting the data. And this is like, oh my gosh, this is like painful for an ops person. It takes a lot of time. And what you want to do ultimately with this is to automate that and free up the time of your ops teams, right? To be doing the big, exciting, innovative stuff that is going to help your company scale.
Absolutely. Yeah. You don't need to be getting bogged down into the nitty-gritty details.
Exactly.
And yes. Okay. That's awesome. Okay. So my next question then is, so do you have to have someone on your team who knows how to code, or will HubSpot provide support in that aspect?
Sure. So
I tell you what, I have a really good example to share with you, a personal example. So this happened to me, hey, we're all friends here. I'm not ashamed to admit this, but last Monday, I sent a reminder email to a client and I said, hey, friendly reminder. I sent this reminder email via QuickBooks Online. And it was basically a message that was sent out to this particular client. And it said, this is a reminder that your invoice is due. It's past due at this point. And he wrote back immediately to me and he was like, Alicia, we paid this 2 weeks ago. And I was like, oops, yeah, I missed that somehow. And so did my bookkeeper. So yeah, if it was all in one system. See, I didn't know what she was doing, the bookkeeper. I just didn't have that kind of visibility. I was looking for some type of confirmation of payment received, and I never got it. So in my mind, oh, he hasn't sent it yet. Let me go into the system and send a reminder email. And yep, sure enough, he had already made payment. Yeah.
Ooh. I know, we've all been there. We know how it is. We know how that feels. And it's like, oh, we should know better. I should know better. And oh man, I totally feel you on that. But then also think about your customer to say, wow, she didn't know this. Like, this is not a delightful customer experience.
I know.
So important, right? It's so easy to switch. And I truly think, and I truly believe this, that it's, there are a lot of products out there and a lot of services out there, but what's going to differentiate you is the customer experience. So how easy is it to use your product? How easy is it to do business with you? And so that customer experience is so important. And if your customers have to correct you or repeat, their challenge that they're trying to solve or question, that's just not a great experience. And it all fundamentally comes back to having accurate and holistic data on your customers.
Yes.
Great example. Yep. And I think we've all been there.
Yes. And data that's very visible.
Yes.
Because it was there. I just didn't see it. You know what I mean? It was there. I would have had to click on a few things here and there to look. But if I had greater visibility, I would have just known right away. And even some type of automated alert or notification, which I'm assuming because there's some coding that can be involved here to customize Operations Hub, that if that's a feature that you want, you might be able to code that into the tool is.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Okay. And I think, that's a great point, but, we also want this to be a tool that's easy for people like yourself to use, right? So you don't need to have, extensive coding experience. And, we have I used to lead our customer success organization, and, we just have a fantastic CSM and onboarding and support team that, is there to help as well.
That's great. Well, I want to make sure that we don't run out of time before we actually have an opportunity to discuss some resources that you would like to share with our listeners. I have a working list here of some things that I found through HubSpot, but I'm curious, do you have any recommendations for any books, Alison, where people can learn maybe more about RevOps or just operations in general?
Great question. I think this is, and there aren't a lot of books out there. I'll be quite honest with you.
I know. I know.
It's a fairly new concept. And I think, we're still figuring it out. And I wish there was a playbook. I wish there was a book or a playbook out there to say, here's how you do RevOps. And so, I think part of what we're trying to do is actually write the book on it. Similar to what HubSpot did back in the day with, inbound marketing was a new concept. There wasn't really a playbook out there. So we are working quite hard at this internally at HubSpot. I know we have a bunch of content that I'd be happy to share and add to your list in terms of articles. That Medium article that we just published that you referred to last week, I think is a great starting point. So happy to send over a few additional links, but there is no one book. If anyone hears of one, please let me know at this point that I would more broadly recommend.
Well, and I'm glad you clarified that. For people who may go out there, they hear this interview and they might go out searching on Amazon, for example, looking for something and may kind of run into a wall. And honestly, it's not just RevOps. I find that that's the case for operations in general. And I wish, I don't know if we have enough time to talk about this, but I'm curious also to know if you all leverage any of the operations management frameworks that are out there already, like Lean Six Sigma. I had a call with someone earlier today and we were talking about the EOS, which is the entrepreneurial operating system. So that's that also involves a lot of the things that we've been talking about. Do you all leverage any of those frameworks or maybe some other type of framework within RevOps? Or are you completely creating this from scratch?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we leverage a lot of frameworks. The EOS is one. And I don't think we've adopted one single framework. And I don't think any business should, because, businesses are going through so many different journeys. And I think you have to figure out what frameworks work for you at any given point in time. And so even, as I think about RevOps as a framework, RevOps could be you create a brand new team, you pull all of your ops and strategy and enablement teams and do a big reorg and create a big RevOps organization. Or it may just be a mindset in terms of, how you want your ops teams to operate and collaborate and get aligned with one another. So it really depends on, I get this question all the time. Do I want to create a big centralized, ops teams? Do I keep them decentralized? And there's a spectrum, and you can do depending. I think you need to adopt whatever framework or whatever model makes sense for the challenges and the growth that your company may be going through. So I think those frameworks are all great, but I would say I think you need to pick and choose in terms of what's best for you. So, there is a little bit of, I would say picking and choosing from, how we've developed ops over time, but it's a lot of, innovating on what we need at HubSpot today.
Absolutely. That definitely makes sense. So I know there's also the HubSpot Academy.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that and how people can go there and learn about different topics that pertain to growing and scaling their companies?
HubSpot Academy. I cannot recommend it more. I would have saved myself, thousands of dollars on business school and just gone and learned through HubSpot Academy. I will say there is so much content that anyone can check out and learn. I think we have some of the most world-class professors. They're super engaging. A lot of content on, CRM, marketing, sales, services to learn. So I can't recommend it more. I'm so glad, that you teed that up. So be sure to check that out.
Yes, and we'll definitely make sure that we have links to all of these resources in this particular episode's show notes. I also would love if you could plug the meetings that you've been doing on Clubhouse. Because I've listened in on a couple of them just as a fly on the wall, but some very interesting conversations.
Yeah, so Clubhouse is new to me. I'm still figuring it out, but it's been so much fun, mostly to learn and meet new people in this space. And what's so exciting about it is we're all trying to figure out RevOps together. And so it's just a great opportunity. Me personally, I've learned so much from these conversations. I hope others have as well. But we have a RevOps club. I think it's called the club. So you can look that up, and we're doing it on a weekly basis on Wednesdays. So please check us out and follow it. We've had some really great folks and just really great dialogue. And, selfishly, I'm learning so much through it as well. So it's been a blast. So thanks for that reminder.
Oh, absolutely. And so for those of you who are listening, if you are not familiar with Clubhouse, it's a new social media type app, audio only. And right now it's only available for the iPhone, but I do know that Android development is currently taking place. But we will also, if you aren't sure how to get set up, you do have to receive an invitation in order to be able to download and access the app. So if you need an invitation, we're going to make sure that we put some instructions in the show notes as well, so that you don't miss out on these amazing conversations that Alison is facilitating every Wednesday. What's the best way for people to follow you, Alison, kind of keep up with the latest developments in RevOps?
Sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Alison Elworthy, just with one L, or Twitter, same thing, Alison Elworthy.
Okay, awesome. What I'd like to do really quickly is just recap some of the things that we've discussed about diversity, digital transformation, all through the lens of revenue operations. And I'm sure you had no idea that I was going to go there with diversity. So,
no, this was great.
I was telling everyone, for those of you who are listening, I was like, Alison, just trust me. Just trust me. Just stay with me and we'll get through it. So I thought it was just a really interesting take on the conversation around diversity and bringing up the fact that, those of us who are in the operations space, how we don't always, get the attention that other.
Well, I am on a mission, just so you know, it's a joke now. I'm on a mission to make the ops person the superhero of their business.
And we should be
unsung hero today. And
yes.
They superhero. So we do this thing at HubSpot. Maybe this is a little too much, where, every quarter I recognize the top performers within the RevOps organization. And, there's a gift involved, but one of the things you get is an actual RevOps cape. So it comes with a cape and, that eye mask. I have one next to my desk. So I am serious about making, folks in ops the superhero. So hopefully, everyone out there in ops will get a cape, because you deserve it.
I love it. I love it. So, and I thought it was brilliant the way that you were able to talk about, again, from a diversity in the workplace and the diversity and in the makeup of skill sets, within the workforce, and how historically people with those operational backgrounds tended to be the last to be invested in. And you're on a mission to change that, which I think is a beautiful and much needed and long overdue thing. And because operations isn't just confined to manufacturing, it certainly has a place in non-manufacturing environments as well. And just to, again, recap, you were great about giving us kind of a glossary of certain business terms that some of our listeners, they may hear some of these acronyms or some of these terms and are wondering, what the heck is that? And so just to repeat, a CRM, again, stands for Customer Relationship Management. And as you mentioned, Alison, it is the foundation of any business. It's a foundation around your network and the relationships that you're developing, and how you can actually assign a value to those different contacts and relationships. And HubSpot, as you mentioned, is a leading provider of CRM software, and they provide all kinds of services, the academy, blog articles, the new podcast network, all of these resources to help us small business owners not only grow our companies, but scale them as well. Thank you also for explaining to us the difference between marketing operations and RevOps. Again, RevOps, as you mentioned, is, it brings together all of these functions of sales, marketing, customer success, and it helps us to think about strategy in a centralized, unified way. I also like the fact that you talked about diversity in business units and how it is it's a win, a threefold win, a win for customers. It's a win internally for the team members, as well as a win for individuals and operations. I also thought it was interesting how you said, HubSpot, you described it as a scrappy startup, and how now you all have scaled into this very large organization, and how as we start to grow from being small and nimble and agile and somewhat lean, as we grow larger, we become slower and clunkier and more decentralized, but that you all are on a mission to still remain big and have that same level of flexibility, be big and fast, as well as agile. Just one more thing, I would be remiss if I didn't repeat it again, and that is what Operations Hub actually does. One, it syncs your data from different software as a service tools that you may have bi-directionally, meaning it's not just a one-way communication. The second thing is it's programmable automation. And third, data quality automation. Alison, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
And if you want more details about Alison, HubSpot, and their new tool, Operations Hub, make sure you follow Alison on LinkedIn as well as Twitter. Again, her name is spelled Alison. Last name is Elworthy, ELWORTHY. Don't forget to check out businessinfrastructure.tv. That's where you'll be able to access links to the HubSpot Academy, Operations Hub, the Diversity Report, all of these resources that we've been talking about throughout this interview. You'll be able to quickly click on links and get access to those resources right away. Again, the best way to access that information is at businessinfrastructure.tv. While you're there, just click on the search icon. You can type in Alison's name, or you can do a search by season 12 and you will find this episode. You'll also find more information on our sponsors. Supporting them helps us keep this show free for you. Thank you so much for tuning in and for being a loyal subscriber. Remember, stay focused, be encouraged. This entrepreneurial journey is a marathon and not a sprint. Until the next time.
Thank you for listening to Business Infrastructure, the podcast about curing back office blues with 𝗕𝗂𝘀𝘀𝗶𝘀𝗀𝗏. If you like what you've heard, do us a favor and subscribe, leave a rating and review, and more importantly, share with your colleagues and team members who could benefit from the information. Join us next week for another episode of Business Infrastructure with 𝗕𝗂𝘀𝘀𝗶𝘀𝗀𝗏.